Chairman. I appreciate the chance to make a modest contribution to part two of this bill. I need to begin gently, Mr. Chairman. The last speaker, Moana Maki, who is a very, very experienced member of this House, I don't know that she actually particularly addressed part two of the bill, but she certainly got a lot of her agenda out there. And I just gently want to sort of point out to her that on this side of the House, we actually write our own speeches. We don't actually need an opposition member. We don't actually need an opposition member to tell us what we're going to talk about. It's with slightly heavy heart that I speak this morning, because we've been through the first reading, we've had that lengthy committee stage, and on occasion the contribution of opposition members was valued and very, very positive. We've had the second reading, we've been through part one, we're now on part two, and all that the Labor members have done is got a whole pile off their chest, much of which is not particularly relevant to this piece of legislation. And I want to repeat to the opposition the offer I made to them last night. Let's get rid of all this posturing and posing and displays of emotion that have been going on. And why doesn't the opposition, Mr. Chairman, in this debate on part two, actually reach out to the government in the way that we're trying to reach out to them and say, OK, we've got to save ACC. Part two is about saving ACC. Why don't we get down to work and do that together? Because the people of New Zealand require that of us, and that is what part two does. Along with part one, it's about making ACC affordable and financially viable well into the future for ordinary New Zealanders. The member, Ms Beaumont, did a far better job than the speaker that followed her in addressing the clauses of part two of the bill, and I commend her at least for that. She talked about part two being an attack on workers. I don't understand that. The attack on workers would have been what would have happened had Labor remained in office, because the consequences of Labor remaining in office and persisting with the attitude that they're showing in this debate is that ACC would have collapsed as a 24/7 accident insurance scheme, which still has the potential, if fixed by measures such as in part two, to serve New Zealanders well. The phrase mean-spirited was used, and I can't see what in part two could be described as mean-spirited. What is mean-spirited about introducing changes to the legislation that actually saves ACC within the realms of what the country can afford? The opposition should have learnt from 9 long and some would say miserable years in government that you can only throw money at a situation for so long. But at some point in time, responsibility has got to be exercised. That word responsibility, Labor members, when are you going to start showing some of it? We heard the phrase blatant unfairness. But is it blatant unfairness to the taxpayers of New Zealand and the levy payers to make the AC scheme more affordable and therefore to save it? That is what part two does, as my colleague Mr King says. It makes ACC affordable and sustainable. What is blatantly unfair about that? There is nothing in part two that is blatantly unfair to anybody. The words mean, nasty, unfair, emotive words which have no meaning in part two.